Hi everyone, welcome to Lesson 8, Jacob's Favoritism and Joseph's Slavery. When we left off last time, Jacob was on the run. He had deceived his father. He had stolen the blessing from his brother Esau. Esau was so angry that he was out for revenge. He was going to murder his brother, and so Jacob had to run for his life. We also saw last time how Jacob had this amazing dream when he was on the run. God came to him in this dream, promised to take care of him, to bring him home safely. And that's where we left off last time. The introduction at the top of page 28 fills us in on what happened next. So it says there at the top of 28, Jacob fled to his mother's family home. So Jacob runs away way up north to where his mother Rebekah had grown up. And really this is the same place that Abraham had lived. This is where Abraham had come from when God called him to leave his home and go to the promised land. And so he flees to his mother's family home, and Jacob eventually married two wives. Those two wives were sisters. And there is a whole lot wrong with that. Jacob was far from a perfect person. And there's a long story, a very complicated situation that led to him marrying two sisters. And you can read that for yourselves. We're not going to read through those chapters here in this lesson, but you're welcome to read that whole sad story. So he marries two sisters, Rachel and Leah. He loved Rachel, but he despised Leah. God saw Leah's grief and gave her many children. Rachel had very few, just two sons. As a result, Jacob showed favoritism to the children that Rachel had, Joseph and Benjamin. So he favored the two sons that his favored wife had, lots of favoritism going on. And that caused more than its share of trouble. And we're going to see some of that trouble here in this lesson today, caused by Jacob's favoritism. Okay, let's take a look at the timeline here briefly. We're at lesson 8. At the end of this lesson, we'll see Joseph being sold into slavery. That takes place around the year 1900 BC. So we're already about 200 years after God called Abraham to leave his home and to travel to the promised land. The patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they live very long lives. God blesses them with long lives. And so we're already 200 years now past that first call of Abraham in 2100 BC. We're going to be starting today with Genesis 37, verses 1 through 36. This is Joseph's fall from exalted son to slave. This is taking place after Jacob has already returned home to the promised land. So Jacob spends a long time, spends decades on the run. This is when he gets married and has all of these children, all of these sons. And then he does eventually return home to the promised land. He does meet up again with Esau. Jacob is terrified that Esau is still going to be angry, that Esau is going to try to kill him when they meet up. But Esau actually, and somewhat amazingly, forgives his brother Jacob, doesn't kill him, doesn't want to kill him anymore. And so Jacob obviously is relieved about that and settles in the promised land where his father Isaac and grandfather Abraham had settled. And so he's living there in the promised land now with these 12 sons. But Jacob looked with great favor on Joseph, the oldest son of his favorite wife, and treated him better than his other sons, unfortunately. And so jealousy led Joseph's brothers then to do the unthinkable, first leaving Joseph to die and then selling him into slavery. So let's read those verses. Pause the video and read Genesis 37, 1 through 36. Okay, thank you for reading those verses. Let's go to the questions. Question number 1. Like father, like son. That's a common expression. It means that sons usually grow up to be like their fathers. In this case, like father and mother, like son. In what way did Jacob make the same mistake in raising his children that his parents Isaac and Rebekah had made? See verse 3 especially. All right, so if you think back to last lesson, we saw that Isaac and Rebekah had a serious problem with playing favorites. Isaac favored his son Esau, Rebekah favored her son Jacob. They each had their favorite twin, and that caused all sorts of problems with Jacob and Esau, and what Jacob did in stealing the blessing, and Esau wanting to kill his brother. All sorts of problems there. And you might think, you might hope that Jacob might learn from that, that when he now has a family, that he would be very careful not to play favorites, very careful to make sure that he treated all of his children the same. But well, like father, like son, we learn from our parents. We learn sometimes good things from our parents. Sometimes we learn bad things from our parents. And that's a good reminder to all parents that your children are always watching, always learning, and they pick up your good habits and also your bad habits. In this case, Jacob ends up showing favoritism just like his parents had. He shows favoritism to one son over the others. Joseph becomes his favorite son. And that's going to cause a lot of problems here. Okay, number 2, Joseph's dreams did not help the situation. What did his dreams seem to indicate would happen in the future? What's the deal with those dreams? What do those dreams indicate? So Joseph has these dreams, and he is very eager to tell his brothers about these dreams because his dreams seemed to indicate that Joseph would be in charge of his brothers, that his brothers would come and bow down to him. And we're going to see eventually how these dreams actually are fulfilled. But this does not help the situation. This causes Joseph's brothers to resent him even more. That this guy is having dreams about his brothers bowing down to him. Not a good thing. Joseph probably, if he was a little bit smarter, would have kept those dreams to himself. Number 3, Jacob sent Joseph to check on his brothers who were taking care of the flocks far away. When his brothers saw Joseph coming, what plot did they devise against him? So Joseph's brothers, what do they decide to do? Well, they are ready to kill Joseph. Let's get rid of this dreamer. They are completely jealous of Joseph because of the love that he receives from Jacob that they don't. These gifts that Jacob gives to Joseph, his favorite son, these dreams that Joseph is having, they are so resentful, so angry, so jealous that they are ready to kill their brother. Now, number 4, Reuben, the oldest of the brothers, suggested a different idea. What was his idea? So Reuben is the oldest, and he realizes we're getting a little bit carried away here. We can't go through with this and kill our brother. And so he suggests, let's throw him in a cistern. Uh, Maybe we should talk about that just for a second here. So this was a dry and very desert-like area of the world. And so to get water, to make sure that they had water for their flocks and herds, what they would do is dig these deep cisterns. Maybe if you dig deep enough, you get a little bit of groundwater coming up. If it rains, rain was not very common, but if it rains, then some of that water will be stored in these cisterns. So these are very deep, very dark holes that are dug in the desert, basically, these cisterns. And Reuben thinks, let's throw him in there. And then I can come back, Reuben thinks, and pull him out, and everyone will kind of calm down after a while, and things will blow over, and this will all be okay. But number 5, the arrival of the Ishmaelites, descended from Abraham's illegitimate son Ishmael, when he and Sarah did not trust God to deliver them a son. Again, that's a whole long story and a sad story that you can read through. But Abraham does have this other son, Ishmael, and these are his descendants. The Ishmaelites presented a different opportunity. Judah came up with a new plan. Rather than killing him or leaving him for dead in the dried cistern, what did they plan to do with Joseph? See verses 26 and 27. So Judah comes up with this new plan. Uh, Instead of killing our brother, instead of leaving him in this cistern, let's sell him as a slave. That way, we get rid of him and we also get money for it. So this is a win-win situation. Our brother's gone. We're a little bit richer. What's wrong with that, right? And evidently Reuben is not around to say, wait a second, guys, let's slow down here again before we do something that we're going to regret. And so they end up doing that. They sell their own brother as a slave. They let these Ishmaelites carry him away to a foreign country. Just a terrible, almost unthinkable sort of a thing that they do this to their own brother. All right, number 6. Judah said that selling Joseph into slavery was morally better than killing him. Uh, was it really morally better than killing him? Discuss that. So what do you think? Was selling Joseph into slavery morally better than killing him? I guess from some perspective you might be able to argue at least they didn't take his life. At least they allowed him to keep on living, even though the life of a slave is not a very pleasant life at all, obviously. But still, this is still a serious sin against their brother. This is a serious sin against their father, deceiving their father, making him think that his son is dead. This is a sin against God. Um, and sometimes we try to do this, right? We try to excuse one sin that we do by saying, well, at least it wasn't as bad as some other sin that I could have done. But really what we're doing is just playing games when we try to do that. We're just excusing one sin with another sin. It doesn't work like that in God's sight. All sins are serious in God's sight. God threatens to punish all sin, whether we think it's a big one or a small one. When it comes to our condemnation and punishment, sin is sin. And this is absolutely a serious sin. Number 7, how did these brothers cover up what they had done? What's their cover-up plan? So what's the plan to cover this up? Well, they tell their father that Joseph has been killed by a wild animal. They take his coat, they rip it to shreds, dip it in some blood so it's all bloody and torn up, and give it to Jacob and say, we found this. Does this belong to Joseph? We think maybe a wild animal got him. And so they cover up their crime. Convince their father that his son is dead. He goes into mourning for his son. Just a terrible situation all the way around. All right, let's go then to Genesis 39, verses 1 through 23. We're going to read about Joseph's service in Potiphar's house and his imprisonment. What happens to Joseph after he's sold into slavery? Well, not long after Joseph arrived in Egypt, that's where the Ishmaelites took him down to Egypt. He was sold by the Ishmaelites to a man named Potiphar, and we're going to see how Potiphar's wife tried to entrap Joseph, and he ended up in prison. So let's read Genesis 39, 1 through 23. All right, question number 8. Who was Potiphar, the man to whom Joseph was sold? What do you know about him? Who was this guy Potiphar? He was the captain of the guard, one of Pharaoh's high-ranking officials. So this is an important and powerful guy in Egypt, in charge of security, basically, kind of the police captain, we might say, something kind of like that, or the sheriff. All right. Number 9, what did God do for Joseph while he was a slave in Potiphar's house? What does God do for Joseph? God continues to bless Joseph, to be with Joseph. Joseph does good and faithful work. God blesses everything that Joseph does. So even though Joseph has been carried off as a slave in a foreign land, um, God is still with him. God is still watching over him and blessing him. Uh, he hasn't gone so far, been taken so far away that God doesn't know where he is, that God isn't able to take care of him. God is still with him. And number 10, because God was with him, what did Potiphar do for Joseph? So Potiphar notices that Joseph is different. Um, this slave, he works hard. He does good work. He doesn't get by with doing the bare minimum. He doesn't need someone to threaten him or yell at him. This guy is different. And that is to Joseph's credit, because you just imagine everything that Joseph has been through. You might expect that Joseph would be a little bit resentful, a little bit angry at God, angry at life, angry at the world. Um, but here Joseph is doing good and faithful work, and Potiphar notices that and trusts Joseph and puts him in charge of his entire household. Um, that's how much he trusts Joseph. That he is put in charge of everything, basically everything that Potiphar owns. Okay, number 11. What did Potiphar's wife want Joseph to do? So Potiphar's wife wants Joseph to come to bed with her. He's a young, handsome man, and she's going to take advantage of that, or she wants to. Number 12, Joseph was not principally concerned about the possibility of getting into trouble with Potiphar. What was his principal, his main concern? What was the biggest thing that he was um, concerned about if he were to do this? So Joseph's main concern was that he didn't want to sin against God. It's not just that he was afraid of getting into trouble, and obviously he would have gotten into trouble, but his biggest concern is, I am not willing to do something that my God has told me not to do. I am not willing to sin against my God. And again, right, we might think that Joseph would be angry against God, would say, I'm just going to do whatever I want to do because God obviously has abandoned me, but that wasn't the case. Joseph still believes in God, still loves God, still desires to obey God, and this is, our motivation too for doing what is right. Hopefully, we do what's right. We say no to what's wrong, not just because we're scared of getting in trouble, but because we love God and we want to obey Him. Number 13, sleeping with Potiphar's wife would have been wrong. What limits does God put in sexual intimacy between people? review the sixth commandment below. So the sixth commandment is printed there for you on page 30. What does God have to say about situations like this? What does the sixth commandment tell us? That God intends for sexual intimacy to be shared only by a husband and a wife. What Potiphar's wife wanted was adultery, something that God clearly forbids. This intimacy is intended by God only for a husband and a wife. Okay, number 14. After Potiphar's wife grabbed him, Joseph ran out of the house, leaving his cloak behind. What lie did she tell Potiphar to get Joseph in trouble? So, what is the lie here? Potiphar's wife makes the claim that Joseph attacked her, that Joseph wanted to take advantage of her, that it was him doing this, that he's in the wrong. Obviously, a lie. It's the complete opposite, but that's what she says. 15. A slave assaulting the wife of his master would have been a crime punishable by death. But Potiphar didn't have Joseph killed. In fact, he put him in a prison that was under his supervision. We find that out in Genesis 40, verse 4, that he ends up in a prison that was supervised by the captain of the guard. Uh, why do you think Potiphar might have done this? Why doesn't he just put him to death right there and then? That's normally what would have happened. So why doesn't Potiphar simply execute this slave for committing this terrible crime? That normally is what would have happened, but we don't know. This is to some degree an assumption, but perhaps Potiphar is thankful for all of Joseph's faithful service. Maybe he doesn't fully believe his wife. Maybe he thinks this just doesn't sound like something that Joseph would do. Joseph has been so good, so trustworthy, so faithful in all of these things. It just doesn't sound like him. Perhaps this is a false accusation. Um, and so he doesn't execute Joseph. Uh, he does put Joseph in prison, but even here we see God watching over Joseph, uh, protecting, preserving his life, not letting him be executed right there and then. And 16, as had been the case in Potiphar's home, even in prison, what did God do for Joseph? So things have gone from bad to worse for Joseph. It's bad enough that his own brothers sell him into slavery. But now he is falsely accused of a terrible crime, thrown into prison for the rest of his life. It's hard to imagine things getting any worse for Joseph. And now, if he didn't before, now you might expect that Joseph would be angry, would be resentful, that he would abandon this God who it seems has abandoned him. But even here in prison, Joseph continues to serve God, and God continues to bless Joseph, continues to be with Joseph, keeps him safe, blesses the work that he did, and Joseph continues to do good and faithful work, and he's put in charge of the prisoners there in the prison. Just a remarkable thing. I don't think that there are many people who, after going through all of that, would get up each morning and say, all right, I'm going to do good and faithful work. I'm going to serve and obey God and do everything I can to demonstrate my love for God. It's a remarkable thing. But that's exactly what Joseph does, and God continues to bless him. 17, read 1 Corinthians 10:13, and the sixth and seventh petitions of the Lord's Prayer, which are there in that box at the bottom of page 30. What promise does God make when we are tempted to sin? So in the sixth petition of the Lord's Prayer, for example, we say that God surely tempts no one to sin, right? That God guards and keeps us so that we're not led into false belief or despair or other sins. You know, if all of these things, like we were talking about before, if all of these things happened to me, that I was sold into slavery and then accused of a crime I didn't commit and thrown in prison for the rest of my life, I sure would be tempted to despair, to give up any hope, right? To stop believing in God. But we're also told here in the seventh petition of the Lord's Prayer that God delivers us from evil. He delivers us from temptation, these temptations to sin. God promises that he will protect us, that God will provide a way out of temptation for us. And certainly we see that here in the case of Joseph, that God continues to strengthen Joseph, to keep him in the faith, to keep him from despairing and giving up. And that's something that God promises for us too. God is not out to destroy our faith. God is not trying to lead us into temptation, to get us to stumble and fall from faith and abandon him or anything else like that. There are times when God allows difficulties to come into our lives. Hopefully, he never allows us to be sold into slavery or to be thrown into prison. But God promises that when these difficult situations arise in our lives, that he will protect us, that he will provide a way out of these situations, that he will not allow these things to overwhelm us or lead us to despair. And those are promises that we can rely on. Okay. Some key questions then. A, what did Joseph's brothers do to Joseph to get rid of him? They sell him into slavery. B, what led Joseph from slavery to jail? He was falsely accused of a crime. Again, things go from bad to worse. see how did God take care of Joseph, whether he was in Potiphar's house or even in prison. God protected him. God blessed everything he did. And as we'll see next time, God allowed these things to happen for a very good and very specific reason. God continued to love Joseph, to take care of Joseph. And we're going to see how God delivers Joseph from this bad situation, how he uses these bad things for good, not just for Joseph's good, but for his family's good and really for the world's good. So God has not abandoned Joseph. God has not forgotten about Joseph. And we're going to see that very clearly next time too. Okay, homework for next time. Please work on learning the 6th and 7th petitions of the Lord's Prayer, which we just read through at the bottom of page 30. Please get familiar with those, memorize those as best as you're able to right now. No Bible passage memory work, since those are two longer sections to look at there from the Catechism. Be able to answer those questions that we just went through. And then there are some pages to read in Luther's Catechism, which will talk more about temptation, God delivering us from temptation, delivering us from evil, how God strengthens us and how he uses bad things for our good. Lots of really important stuff there. So it would be good to read through those sections of the Catechism as well. Hope that these lessons are working out well for you. If you have any questions or concerns, again, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me. That'll do it for this lesson. Have a great day, and God bless.